It was one of those nights when even the wind felt cruel. The train station was nearly empty. Just flickering lights, the distant echo of a departing train, and the sound of footsteps fading into the cold. On a wooden bench sat a woman, alone, trembling, hugging herself for warmth. Her name was Maxine Waters. She'd been sitting there for hours waiting for a train that wasn't coming. Her thin coat did little against the freezing air. People passed by, glancing for a moment, then looking away, pretending not to see her. But someone did notice. A tall man in a brown leather jacket stepped off the last train of the night. A cowboy hat shaded his eyes and a suitcase hung loosely in his hand. Jackson Cole, a Texas rancher known for his wealth but loved for his humility. He wasn't supposed to be there. His private driver was late, and for the first time in years, Jackson found himself walking through the common waiting area, the kind of place he rarely saw. That's when he saw her, a woman with frost on her eyelashes and pain in her eyes. He slowed down, his boots echoing softly on the cold tiles. Something about her felt familiar, not her face but her silence, the kind of silence that carried stories of loss, struggle, and strength. He hesitated for a second. Then he walked closer. "Ma'am," he said gently, tipping his hat. "You all right?" Maxine lifted her head slowly, startled. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice cracked. Jackson frowned. Her lips were blue from the cold. She wasn't fine. Without saying another word, he took off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She tried to protest. "Sir, you don't have to." But he just smiled. "Where I'm from," he said softly, "we don't walk past people who need help." She stared at him, this stranger with kind eyes and a warm jacket, wondering why anyone would care. And in that frozen train station, two worlds quietly collided. He had no idea that this one act of kindness would change both their lives and make history. It was one of those winter nights when even the streetlights seemed tired. Snow drifted sideways across the empty parking lot outside the old train station. Inside, the sound of the wind slipped through cracked windows and hollow metal beams, carrying a chill that cut through every coat and scarf. At the far end of the platform sat a woman, alone, shivering, her knees pulled tightly to her chest. Her name was Maxine Waters. She had been there since sunset, watching the schedule board blink delayed again and again, until even the clock seemed to pity her. Her coat was thin, her shoes soaked through. She pressed her hands together, trying to find warmth in the space between her palms. She wasn't homeless by choice. Life had simply pushed her too far, too fast. 2 months earlier, she'd lost her job at a diner, then her apartment, then the hope that tomorrow might be better. The station had become her waiting room, for a train that might take her somewhere new, or nowhere at all. Passengers passed by without a word. A businessman glanced at her and looked away. A young couple laughed as they hurried past, holding coffee cups in each other's hands. To them, she was invisible, just another soul fading into the cold. But someone did notice. The final train of the night screeched to a halt, steam rolling along the platform like fog. From the first-class car stepped a man whose presence quietly filled the space. A tall figure in a dark brown leather jacket, boots dusted with snow, and a wide cowboy hat that shadowed sharp but kind eyes. Jackson Cole. He owned one of the largest cattle ranches in Texas, land stretching farther than most people's dreams. He'd come to the city for business meetings and charity work, but what people admired most about him wasn't his money. It was the way he treated everyone the same. Tonight, though, he was just a traveler with a delayed driver and a long walk to kill time. He wasn't looking for anyone. Yet fate had other plans. As Jackson crossed the waiting area, his gaze caught the fragile figure on the bench. At first he thought she was asleep, but then he saw the tremor in her hands, the pale skin beneath her eyes. Something in his chest tightened. He paused, torn between minding his own business and doing what his gut told him was right. He set his suitcase down, walked slowly toward her, and cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but warm. "You okay?" Maxine flinched, startled out of her thoughts. Her eyes met his, tired, wary, yet filled with a quiet dignity. "I'm fine," she murmured, though her lips barely moved. Jackson studied her face. The words said one thing, but everything else, the shaking, the shallow breath, the cracked tone, told another story. "Looks to me like you've been here a while," he said gently, Train running late? She gave a small embarrassed laugh. I don't think it's coming. He crouched down so their eyes were level. For a moment, neither spoke. The station clock ticked loudly behind them. Then, without hesitation, Jackson shrugged off his heavy leather jacket and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it startled her. "Sir, you don't have to." He interrupted with a faint smile. "Where I come from, ma'am, we don't walk past folks who need help. That ain't how my mama raised me." The words landed softly, but they carried weight. She blinked, tears stinging her eyes from more than just the cold. "Thank you," she whispered. I'll give it back. Don't worry about that." He stood, glancing toward the small coffee kiosk still open near the doors. "Tell you what, how about something hot to drink? Coffee? Soup?" She hesitated. No one had offered her kindness in a long time. But the sincerity in his voice melted her fear. A few minutes later, they sat across from each other in the empty cafe, 2 paper cups steaming between them. Maxine kept her hands wrapped around hers like it was gold. "So," Jackson said, removing his hat and setting it aside. "What brings you here this late?" She stared into the cup. "I was trying to get to Denver. My sister lives there, but the ticket money didn't last long." Jackson nodded slowly. He didn't pry. Instead, he said, "Funny thing about life, it can turn faster than a Texas storm. But storms don't last forever, ma'am." Maxine looked up for the first time, meeting his steady gaze. There was no pity in his eyes, just respect. Something inside her began to thaw. As they sat there, surrounded by the hum of vending machines and the occasional announcement echoing through the station, the world outside kept snowing. But inside that tiny cafe, warmth returned, not just to her hands, but to her heart. Neither of them knew it yet. But that single act of kindness would start a story that newspapers would one day call "The Love That Changed History." He thought he was helping a stranger for one night. He didn't know she was about to change the meaning of love for a lifetime. Weeks had passed since that freezing night at the train station. Jackson Cole had returned to his ranch in Texas. Miles of rolling land, wild horses and endless sky, yet something didn't feel the same. Every morning he'd walk past the stables, feel the wind brush against his face, and for a fleeting moment, he'd remember her, the woman on the bench with frost on her eyelashes and courage in her voice. He'd given her his jacket, a warm meal, and a little money to help her get to Denver. He'd thought about checking if she made it. But something held him back. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was fear. Fear of admitting that one simple act of kindness had left a mark deeper than he expected. Life moved on. But sometimes, when life has plans bigger than ours, it finds a way to bring 2 souls back together. One Saturday morning, Jackson was invited to attend a charity event in downtown Dallas, a fundraiser for shelters that supported homeless women. He didn't think twice. Charity work had always been part of his life, something he did quietly, away from cameras. The hall was filled with soft music, round tables draped in white cloth, and volunteers moving about with smiles. Jackson took a seat near the front, listening as the host introduced a guest speaker, a woman who had once lived on the streets but had turned her pain into purpose. As she stepped up to the microphone, Jackson glanced up and froze. It was her, Maxine Waters. She looked completely different. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her coat replaced with a simple but elegant dress. Her voice, calm, confident, filled the hall. "I used to believe," she began, "that when life knocks you down, no one cares whether you get back up. But one night at a train station, a stranger showed me that kindness still exists. He didn't ask for my name. He didn't ask what I'd done wrong. He just gave me warmth and hope." Jackson's chest tightened. Every word felt like a whisper from that night. "I took that hope," Maxine continued, "and I promised myself I'd give it back. Because sometimes one act of compassion can rebuild an entire life." The audience erupted in applause. Jackson sat there silently, his heart full. He wanted to stand up, walk to her, and tell her how proud he was. But he waited. After the speech, people surrounded Maxine, thanking her for her words. She smiled gracefully, shaking hands, accepting hugs. When the crowd thinned, Jackson finally stepped forward. She turned and gasped. "Mr. Cole?" He smiled. "Didn't expect to see me again, huh?" For a moment, the world around them blurred. She laughed softly, her eyes shining. You're the reason I'm here today. I used the money you gave me to get to Denver. My sister helped me find work. Then I started volunteering and, well, one step led to another. Jackson nodded, his voice gentle. You did all the hard work, ma'am. I just handed you a jacket. Maxine's eyes softened. You did more than that. You made me believe people still care. They stood there for a while. No rush, no noise, just two souls reconnecting in a room full of stories. When the event ended, Jackson offered her a ride home. She hesitated, then agreed. They drove through the quiet streets, the city lights flickering across the windshield. So, Jackson said, glancing at her, you planning on staying in Dallas? For now, she smiled. There's so much to do here. So many people to help. He nodded approvingly. You always were a fighter, huh? I guess so, she chuckled. Though I had a good cowboy teacher. Jackson laughed, the sound echoing in the small space between them. When he dropped her off at her small apartment, she turned before leaving. Thank you again, not just for that night, but for today. He tipped his hat. Ma'am, I'm just glad the world finally got to see what I saw that night. She smiled, and for a moment, it felt like the beginning of something neither of them could explain. As Jackson drove away, he couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. Maxine stood there watching until his truck disappeared around the corner. Fate had reunited them once. Deep down, both knew it wouldn't be the last time. What would you do if life brought someone back from your past like this? Would you believe it's fate, or just coincidence? Comment fate if you think some meetings are meant to happen. He thought it was the end of a story, but destiny had just started writing its next chapter. After that night at the charity event, Jackson Cole couldn't shake the feeling that fate was pulling him toward Maxine Waters again. He found himself driving into the city more often, at first for meetings, then for no reason at all. Sometimes he'd accidentally pass by the community center where Maxine volunteered. Other times he'd stop by to donate supplies or sponsor small programs. But every time their eyes met, it was clear this wasn't coincidence anymore. Maxine noticed it too. The tall cowboy who once wrapped her in his coat now stood beside her every weekend, stacking boxes of canned food, fixing leaky pipes, or quietly paying for someone's medicine when they couldn't afford it. The volunteers started whispering, "Isn't that Jackson Cole, the ranch owner? The one with all the land out near San Angelo? What's he doing here, helping out like one of us?" Maxine smiled when she heard them. "He's just being himself," she'd say softly. But deep inside she felt something stirring. Gratitude, admiration, and something more tender she was afraid to name. One rainy afternoon they worked late after the shelter's roof started leaking. The other volunteers had gone home, but Jackson refused to leave Maxine alone. "You don't need to be up here," he called down from the ladder. "I got this," she crossed her arms. "You think I'm just gonna let a millionaire cowboy do all the work?" He laughed, shaking his head. "You sure got a stubborn streak, ma'am." "And you talk too much," she teased back. By the time they finished, both were drenched, laughing like children caught in the rain. Jackson handed her his hat to shield her hair, and for a brief moment their hands touched. The warmth of that touch lingered. Quiet, electric, undeniable. Later that evening, as he drove her home, the sound of rain filled the silence. Maxine looked out the window. "You know, people talk, I know," he said softly. "They always do. They'll say we're too different," she continued. "You the rich rancher, me, a woman who lost everything once." He slowed the truck, turning to her. "You didn't lose everything, Maxine. You found yourself again. That's worth more than money ever will be." She smiled faintly, then looked away, her eyes glistening. "You always know what to say, don't you?" He chuckled. "No, ma'am. I just say what I feel." For the first time, she didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, they became inseparable. They spent Sundays at the ranch, riding horses along the golden fields. Jackson taught her how to rope, and Maxine, surprisingly fearless, picked it up quickly. He admired her courage, the way she faced life head-on after everything she'd been through. She admired his humility, how someone with so much could still be so grounded. But as word spread, not everyone approved. At a local dinner event, whispers followed them. A wealthy woman leaned toward her friend and muttered, "That's her? The woman from the shelter? Oh, Jackson could do so much better." Maxine heard it. Jackson did too. He gently placed his hand over hers under the table. "Don't listen," he whispered. "They don't know your story." She nodded, but her heart ached. That night, as he drove her home, she said quietly, "Maybe this isn't fair to you. You have a name, a reputation. Maxine, he interrupted gently. The only reputation I care about is the kind that comes from doing what's right. And being with you feels right. The truth in his tone silenced her doubts. He walked her to her door, the night calm and quiet. Before she went inside, she turned, her voice soft. You're not like other men, Jackson. He smiled, tipping his hat. Guess I'm just an old cowboy who believes in second chances. She hesitated, then stepped closer and kissed him on the cheek. It was brief, but it sent a warmth through him that no campfire could match. When she closed the door, Jackson stood there for a long moment, smiling to himself under the porch light. He'd found something money couldn't buy. Peace. And for Maxine, behind that closed door, she leaned against the wall, her heart racing. For the first time in years, she believed love could be kind. Do you believe two people from completely different worlds can truly fall in love? Comment true love if you believe love sees no class or color. Their love was real, but when the world found out, everything changed overnight. It started with a single photo. Someone at the charity dinner had snapped a picture of Jackson Cole, the wealthy rancher, holding hands with Maxine Waters, the woman once known for her story of survival. By morning it was everywhere. Texas millionaire cowboy spotted with former homeless woman. From train station to mansion, the love story everyone's talking about. News channels replayed clips from Maxine's old speech. Social media turned her past into headlines, and while some praised the couple for defying the odds, others turned cruel. Gold digger, he's lost his mind. She's just using him. Jackson saw the comments. So did Maxine. For the first time since that night at the train station, Maxine felt small again, like the world had dragged her back to that cold bench, whispering that she didn't belong. When Jackson arrived at her apartment that morning, she didn't open the door right away. You shouldn't be here, she said through the crack. Why not? He asked, voice calm but firm. Because now everyone's watching. They'll twist it. They'll ruin your name. He shook his head. Let them talk. I'm not hiding what I care about. She opened the door slowly, eyes tired from crying. You don't understand, Jackson. I've worked so hard to build my life again. I don't want to be some pity headline. He stepped closer. And you're not. You're the strongest woman I know. That's why I'm with you. Her eyes softened, but she turned away. I just need time to think. He respected that. All right, he said quietly, tipping his hat. But just know, I ain't going anywhere. The following days were difficult. Reporters camped outside Jackson's ranch. Investors called, asking if he'd lost focus. Even a few family members urged him to reconsider his choices. But Jackson didn't flinch. He went about his work, feeding cattle, fixing fences, greeting his ranch hands, all with the same quiet confidence. That evening, one of his workers, Ben, approached him. Boss, he said carefully, I saw the news. Folks talking nonsense, but I just want to say we all respect you for standing by her. Jackson smiled faintly. Appreciate that, Ben. A man's worth ain't measured by who he pleases, it's by what he stands for. Meanwhile, Maxine stayed away from the spotlight. She stopped volunteering for a while, afraid her presence would bring trouble to the shelter. The same people who once cheered for her now whispered behind her back. But one afternoon, a little girl from the shelter ran up to her. Miss Maxine, she said shyly. My mama said you're brave. She said you taught her not to give up. Don't be sad, okay? Maxine knelt, tears welling up. Thank you, sweetheart. That small voice gave her strength again. She realized something. She'd spent years rebuilding her life, but she was still letting the world decide her worth. This time she refused. That weekend, she drove out to Jackson's ranch. The drive was long, dusty, and filled with thoughts she'd been running from. When she arrived, Jackson was out by the corral mending a fence. He looked up and smiled. Didn't think I'd see you so soon. Maxine took a deep breath. I'm tired of hiding. He set down his tools, walked over, and wiped his hands on his jeans. Then don't. She looked into his eyes. They can say what they want, but they'll never understand what we have. You gave me hope when I had nothing, and Her voice trembled. I love you, Jackson. He froze for a second, then smiled softly. Say that again. I love you, she repeated, tears streaming down her cheeks. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms. Well, darling, that makes two of us. The wind swept through the fields as they stood there, two souls who had every reason to give up, but didn't. That evening they sat on the porch together, watching the sun melt into the horizon. You know, Maxine said quietly, maybe all that noise online doesn't matter. The world can talk, but it doesn't get to define us. Jackson nodded. Exactly. People talk, then move on. But real love? That stays, she smiled. You really believe that? He chuckled. Ma'am, I've been around long enough to know, when you find something rare, you hold on to it. They sat in silence, the world finally at peace around them. If you were in their place, would you fight the world for love or walk away to protect your peace? Comment fight if you'd stand up like Jackson, or peace if you'd let go like Maxine almost did. Just when their love seemed unshakable, a tragedy struck the ranch, attesting their bond like never before. For weeks, things between Jackson and Maxine had finally felt peaceful again. They spent evenings on the ranch porch, watching the orange sun slip behind the hills. Sometimes they didn't even talk, they just were. Two people from different worlds finally breathing the same quiet air. But life, as always, has its way of testing what's real. It was a warm summer night when it happened. A thunderstorm had rolled in unexpectedly. Lightning flashed across the sky, striking one of the storage barns near the edge of Jackson's property. Within minutes, the dry hay inside caught fire. Jackson woke to the smell of smoke. He jumped out of bed, threw on his boots, and ran outside. Fire, he shouted to his ranch hands, grabbing a hose. Get the horses out now! The flames spread fast, roaring like an angry beast. Wind whipped sparks toward the stables. Horses neighed in panic. Ranch workers ran with buckets, shouting over the crackling blaze. Maxine rushed out behind him, barefoot, terrified. Jackson, what do you need me to do? Stay back, he yelled. It's too dangerous. But Maxine didn't move. She grabbed a wet towel, wrapped it over her mouth, and ran toward the smaller barn where two colts were trapped. Maxine, Jackson shouted, but she was already inside. The smoke burned her lungs, but she kept pushing forward. She could hear the frightened horses kicking against their stalls. Using all her strength, she unlatched the gate and guided them out. Coughing and stumbling, when she finally emerged covered in ash, Jackson ran to her, pulling her into his arms. You could have been killed, he cried. She smiled weakly, eyes glistening. You'd have done the same for them. He couldn't argue, because she was right. By dawn, the fire was out, but the damage was heavy. Half of the barn was gone. Equipment destroyed. A few of the men were treated for burns, but everyone survived, thanks to Maxine's courage. As the sun rose, she sat beside Jackson on the porch, exhausted. Her hair still smelling of smoke, you know, he said softly. Looking at her, most folks would have run away. She chuckled weakly. Guess I'm not most folks, and he smiled. No, you sure ain't. You've got more heart than anyone I've ever met. Then, without hesitation, he took her hand. Maxine, I've loved you since the night I found you at that station. But after tonight, I can't imagine life without you. She looked up, startled, her breath catching. Jackson, I don't care what the world thinks, he continued. I want you by my side, if for good. Will you marry me? Her eyes filled with tears. You're serious, he nodded. As serious as a Texas sunrise. For a long moment, she just stared at him, the man who had seen her at her lowest and still found beauty. Then she smiled through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you, Jackson laughed, that deep, genuine laugh she loved, and lifted her into his arms, spinning her around despite the exhaustion. The ranch hands, watching from afar, began cheering. Even the horses seemed to neigh louder, as if joining in the celebration. Days later, word spread again. But this time it wasn't about scandal. It was about a love that survived fire, judgment, and fate. Reporters tried to twist it into a story of the billionaire and the survivor, but Jackson stopped all interviews. He wanted no fame, only peace. Instead, Maxine and Jackson focused on rebuilding together. Every morning she joined him in the field, sleeves rolled up, working like one of the crew. The men admired her. That woman's tougher than half of us, one joked, and they all laughed. But they meant it. By the end of the month, the barn was standing again, stronger than before. And at the center of it, a wooden sign carved by hand, Hope rises from the ashes. Jackson surprised Maxine with it one morning. She ran her fingers over the carved words and whispered, That's what you gave me, Jackson? Hope. He smiled softly. No, darling. That's what you brought back into my life. They stood together under the morning sky, holding hands, surrounded by the scent of new wood and fresh grass, symbols of everything they'd rebuilt, both outside and within. If someone risked their life to save what you love, would you call that friendship? Or true love? Comment true love if you believe real love shows up in hard times. Their love had conquered fire. But soon, the world would witness how it changed history itself. The day of their wedding dawned calm and golden, the kind of Texas morning that feels touched by heaven. The ceremony took place right there on the ranch, under the same oak tree where Jackson had first told Maxine he loved her. The rebuilt barn stood proudly in the background, the hope rises from the ashes sign shining in the sunlight like a promise kept. Maxine wore a simple white dress, no diamonds, no glitter, just grace. Jackson stood tall in his best cowboy hat and boots, his eyes soft but steady. Around them gathered everyone who had once doubted, whispered or judged, now sitting quietly, watching a love story rewrite every rule they thought they knew. When the pastor said, "You may now kiss the bride," the crowd erupted in cheers. Ranch hands whistled. Children clapped. Even the horses neighed as if the earth itself was celebrating. For Maxine, it was more than a wedding. It was proof that no one's past defines their worth. For Jackson, it was a reminder that true riches come from the heart, not the bank. As they danced under the open sky that night, lanterns glowing above, reporters stood beyond the fence, not shouting questions but quietly filming. Because what they saw wasn't gossip anymore. It was history. The next morning, news headlines across the country read, "Millionaire Cowboy marries former homeless woman. Their love story inspires the world." Clips from their wedding spread online, gathering millions of views in days. People from every continent commented, sharing how the story touched them. "This made me believe in love. Again. I cried watching this. She deserves everything good in life." Proof that kindness can change destiny. But Jackson and Maxine didn't chase fame. Instead, they used it for good. Together, they started the Hope Barn Foundation, helping women rebuild their lives, offering shelter, job training, and the same kind of second chance that once saved Maxine. Within a year, hundreds of women had found safety, work, and dignity again. At the foundation's first anniversary, Maxine stood on stage beside Jackson and spoke to the crowd. Her voice was steady, full of light. "Once I sat on a cold bench at a train station, forgotten, invisible, and a stranger saw me not for what I was, but for who I could become. That moment didn't just change my life, it gave it back to me." She looked at Jackson, smiling through tears. "Real love doesn't rescue you. It reminds you that you're already worth saving." The audience stood, applauding. Jackson wiped a tear before putting his arm around her shoulders. As the crowd cheered, Maxine glanced at the horizon. The same horizon she once watched in hopelessness. Now it shimmered with endless possibility. Their story, the cowboy and the woman from the station, wasn't just about love. It was about faith, courage, and second chances. If you believe love can heal, rebuild, and rewrite any story, type HOPE in the comments. And remember, one act of kindness can change a life forever.